Hello, everybody. My name is Phil Chan, and I'm the co-founder of Final Bow for Yellowface. Welcome to the final episode of What's the Tea? A daily conversation with a dancer of Asian descent during the month of May for Asian Pacific Heritage Month to highlight the achievements and experiences of Asians in dance. Today, we're chatting with a very special friend of mine, Georgina Pazcoguin, from a soloist from New York City Ballet, who's also raising money for the New York City Ballet COVID Fund. Georgina, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks. I'm also going to ask people to raise money for the Orphan Starfish Foundation as well. I work very closely with Andy Stein, and he helps bring technology to over 15,000 children and visits these programs in over 29 countries. And since the onset of COVID-19, he has not been able to reach his friends and children that he supports across the globe. And if he could just donate any money. I know that New York City Ballet, I'm without a paycheck as of Friday, but I really think that these kids need your help more than me at the moment. So if you could just extend your pocketbook towards them, I'd really appreciate it.
Great. And just an inside joke with Gina, her last name, for anybody who ever wants to know, if anyone is ever curious, it's sort of like playing Monopoly, Pazcoguin, like Paz go again. So just think Monopoly. Hi, Gina. How are you?
You know, I cannot believe that we did this, Phil.
I know. Apparently
it's
producing a daily talk show was a lot.
Yeah, it turns out it's a full-time job. But besides that, it's been I find myself that I was okay for the first 2 months of quarantine. And now that things are settling in and any sort of expectations, I try not to have any expectations. But I guess there was a glimmer of hope that perhaps fall would happen. And now it seems like the entire year for ballet or any sort of performing arts organization is washed. Has been a new sort of, I don't know, it reopened the wound in a sense. So, but I think and these interviews have truly impacted me in a wonderful way, but it's also really, has me reflecting on how much more work we have yet to do in this space of diversity and inclusion. So I'm alive. We're alive. That's one thing.
Yeah. So tell me more about what you have learned. So for our viewers there who might be tuning in for the very first time, Gina and I have essentially talked to one dancer of Asian descent every single day during the month of May. And it came from a place where we felt like a lot of the Asian experience was not being talked about and felt sort of invisible. So this was our opportunity to raise light to issues about being Asian in ballet. So Gina, what did you learn from these conversations this past 31 days?
In a way, it felt like I was able to finally recognize that I am not alone in this process. And I am so grateful to have now a lot of friends that I can connect and share experiences with and vent to beyond you, Phil, even though you're a wonderful friend to do that with. And it has opened my eyes to the decisions that I've made in my career and the possibility, and I'm going to go out there on a limb and say hope that there's still time and a chance for me to continue to grow as an artist, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of our viewers might know you as the rogue ballerina, this sort of fiery dancer at New York City Ballet. But for those of you who might not know you as well as I do. Can you tell us a little bit about where you were from? Where did the ballet bug first hit Gina, and how did we get from that little girl to this crazy ripped Asian in front of me?
Thanks. I do feel ripped. I did a ballet bar this morning. I was born in Altoona, Pennsylvania. My father is Filipino and my mother is Italian. And I am one of 6 children. You got the whole Catholic upon Catholic big family thing happening. And I became Gina Ballerina when my mother could no longer handle the 3 kids. I'm very close in age with my younger 2 siblings. So she essentially had like 3 toddlers running around, and I'm a very high energy person and was dancing. We do like shows after dinner time in the living room. And those skits, I think she kind of caught on that I'm a little dramatic in the best of ways, of course. And she enrolled me in first a ballet school. It was like Ruth Barnes Ballet. And they required her to stand there for every lesson. And she was like, no, this isn't happening. So then she opened the phone book and like got to letter A, and Allegheny Ballet Academy was there. And she called up Deborah Anthony, who's the teacher who taught me. And first question was, hey, I have this child who seems to really like dance, but first things first, do you need me to be there for the lessons? And she was like, no, we actually would prefer you not watch. And she's like, perfect, she'll be there tomorrow. And that's how it happened.
And at what point did you really fall in love with this and say, okay, I don't just want to do this as a hobby, but I want to do this like all the time, every day, as much as I can as a living?
I think the fascination with the difficulty and the persistence that you need and the fine tuning of body technique, I think that was almost immediate. I don't ever remember a time, even as a child, being in the studio. And the studio wasn't in the prettiest part of town. We were just off the railroad tracks. Altoona was a big railroad town back in the day. And so there was not much to look at outside of the windows, but that never bothered me. And I think I was always enamored with the music. You know, Deborah Anthony would play these like Benny Goodman like records, and the classical music was always it was something that truly intrigued me, I think. And then when did I really decide that I must do this? I mean, I obviously loved performing. Like the first time on stage when the curtain went up, I was an angel, and I just felt this rush of adrenaline, and I thought to myself, okay, whatever I need to do to get me here again is great. And then I think when I really, truly decided that this has to be my career was when I came to New York City for the first time and saw a true ballet company perform. And that was San Francisco Ballet, and it was at New York City Center. And the ballet, believe it or not, was Jerome Robbins' The Cage.
That says a lot about you, Gina.
I think so too.
If you saw The Cage and you're like, oh, yep, that's me, I got to do that.
Yeah, so truth.
So tell me a little bit about your ethnic heritage. I mean, obviously we've gone through this incredible journey, starting Final Bow together and connecting with our Asian heritage in this way. But tell the folks who might not know you as well, kind of what is your connection and what's your story with your Filipino heritage?
Well, my father is Filipino, and he came to the States to be a medical doctor, surgeon, and he ended up enlisting in the Army Reserve. And so he is a surgeon for the VA hospital. And at that time, it was a very rare and highly esteemed job description to be a general surgeon. That doesn't exist anymore. So that's my connection to the Filipino heritage. And then he didn't really raise us. I don't speak Tagalog. He says he doesn't speak Tagalog, but when my Uncle Tim calls him and when he's immersed in it, it comes back to him like it's nothing. Like if I were to call him on the phone now and ask him to say something, he would have no idea what I'm talking about. Also, he probably wouldn't even hear me. But I think he made that choice. And it was me going through this process of you and I talking about diversity that I started to finally open up with my dad and ask him questions. You know, he's a man of few words. And it's not from a place of coldness at all. Like my dad is one of the most wonderful and loving human beings on the planet. And he's just not, he would never brag about himself being a general surgeon and a colonel in the Army. He just is not that person. And so when I asked him about his heritage and some of the decisions that he made, he said, you know, I had this opportunity to raise you in a trajectory that was easier. So I did that. And, you know, I asked him a really interesting question recently because he doesn't really, you know, to be honest, I think he's touched that you and I have taken up this cause and are really being outspoken for more inclusivity in dance, but I'm not sure if he really truly grasps how much I would have loved being more steeped in his culture. I mean, I knew the Candys. I was in touch with his mother, who lived to be 103 years old through only by letters. We never traveled to the Philippines. I mean, that's a massive trip for 6 children and financially just not doable. But him, I think what really made me want to connect with his culture was when I received this Filipino award last year. And he wrote me a note. And in that note, he said, I remember the first time I was introduced to one of your ballet masters and the way they looked at me. And he's like, I knew that this was going to be a very hard career for you. And he had never said that before to me. So it was wild. And he also said for one of the first times, I am so incredibly proud of your tenacity and your strength in this pursuit of what you love. And he made it clear that even though I don't say it all the time, I have always, always, always felt it. So for him, verbally speaking it's a big deal for him. So I am starting to feel more and more connected to my cultural heritage. And I made a pact with myself that I will go to the Philippines. I was actually planning to go to the Philippines in July with Orphan Starfish to work with one of their programs, and that was going to be my inaugural trip. And I was so very excited. I think my dad was even trying to find a way to sneak himself in there. I think he had reached out to Andy Stein and was like, do you need a doctor to come? So for some reason or another, fate didn't have that in the cards, but it's going to happen, and it is a priority in my life now.
So, you know, as you said, you probably only recently have discovered your Filipino heritage and are exploring that as part of your identity. But have you experienced other people projecting ideas of what it means to be Asian onto you earlier in your career or as an artist at some point?
I never really saw myself as being different. in terms of the ballet world, also in terms of just normal life until I left home and came to New York City Ballet, came to School of American Ballet. I mean, like Ed, you, me, and Ed, we touched upon this, that I looked around the room and was like, I see no one on these walls. None of these ballerinas look like me. And I did one school report on Maria Talchief. And I was like, I found her fascinating. But she was probably the most ethnic ballerina that I knew of. I wasn't a ballet fanatic, and I was always tracked in my brain to go to New York City Ballet. I mean, I saw Lucia Lacara doing the novice is who I was like, I see myself in her. Or perhaps I saw myself in that character as well. Or in the female empowerment of that entire ballet. Who knows? But it wasn't until the age of like 15, 16 that I started to realize that I am different. And then when I got into the company, the game really changed for me. I all of a sudden went into, how do I describe it? Say it's a uneasy phase. I mean, who doesn't feel anxiety ridden when they're a late teen? But then apply the extra layer of competition of being in arguably the world's best company and trying to fight for a spot and being told that you don't fit in and then seeing no one around you that looks like you, that is shocking. And it has left an impact. So I would say around 17 is when I first started to experience being now what I just accept now as this place is an outlier in the ballet world.
Yeah, it's so funny that that you say you feel like an outlier, because we've talked to a few other dancers this month who felt celebrated and very welcomed by their company because of their heritage and celebrated in that way. So, the fact is you are the only Asian woman that I know of that has ever made it out of the corps at New York City Ballet. There are a few sort of this generation rising through the school at SAB, young Asian ballerinas, which is very exciting to see. But you so far seem to be the only one. What's that about?
You're not holding back, are you, today?
What's the tea?
What's the tea? I'm not the person to ask that question to. And if there's anyone out there that's wondering that beyond you, Phil, my advice is ask the people who make the decisions, because ultimately I have very little autonomy in what's decided in my career. And for a very long time, the one sole person that made all the decisions, whether I got in, whether I was keeping my apprenticeship, whether I was going to dance Thursday, Friday, whether I was going to get promoted or be in the new ballets, was Peter Martins. And now that has shifted to, Jonathan Stafford, our new artistic director. And there, I have thought about this for so long, how much I wish it was a more democratic system, but it's just not. That's just not how the ballet world works. And I know in myself that every single opportunity that I've ever been given was of my own merit. It cannot be attributed to anything else other than I think in the school, my talent was absolutely recognized. And I have to send the biggest love and hugs and kisses to Sidor, because she's the one that saw me at a regional Dance America in, I believe it was Pittsburgh, PA. And I took her master class. And she was just like, "What is your name? And do you know School of American Ballet?" Which I didn't. And she was like, "You must come audition. You have to audition." And then she found my parents and she talked to them. And so she has been, and still is, to this day, one of my biggest supporters. But as to answer your question, what's that about? Why am I the only woman who's of Asian American descent that has broken through the glass ceiling of institutional bias? I don't have the answer for that yet.
How do we do better then? How do we make this not just a blip as an outlier, but how do we create a pathway for more Asian dancers to have a home at New York City Ballet?
I think the paradigm needs to change more than just parading around people of color. It's more than just an ad. It's more than just a casting here or there. It has to become so ubiquitous as that it's not even a big deal to talk about it. Like, for a while, I didn't want to accept the fact that I was the first Asian American woman to be promoted out of the Corps. I don't want that. That's weird. I never wanted that in my career, in my artist trajectory. I never, ever thought in a million years I would be, along with you, a leader and a pioneer in talking about diversity in dance. And how does that paradigm shift? I think, I did say dancers we don't have a lot of say beyond being in a rehearsal room and working hard and proving myself. Like, I have gone as far when I felt Peter Martins and I have had a very clashy relationship. But I do think ultimately it was so adversarial that there was a mutual respect. Does that make any, I don't know if that makes sense. It was just he saw that and was like, okay. When he was not casting me as Dewdrop and I had showed it, and this is in 2013. And I nailed it and it didn't get cast for it. So he said he didn't see me in the costume, is what he said. So then I went and borrowed the costume from the costume department. I said, "Hey, will you let me rent this for an hour?" And they were like, "Just take the damn costume." And I went upstairs in the main and I videoed myself in the freaking costume and I put it on DVD and I shoved it underneath his door. And I wouldn't suggest that you do that because I got into a lot of trouble. But I think he saw that. He saw that absolute confidence. And if you don't see me in the costume, then let me help you. I will help you see me in the costume. I would, that fire in the belly that Ed talked about, I have used that. I have that. And I can't ask every dancer to be like that. That takes a lot of chutzpah. And it does not come without you also want to be respectful of the people who lead. I do believe in that, but at this point, we have to call our leaders out. And I think a way for dancers to speak up while being safe is to go to AGMA. I think our union can help a lot. And the fact that right now, our union, AGMA, and in the discussions had with them, the fact that they didn't have something like this in place and then called me up and asked me to organize something for AGMA, unfortunately unpaid, is I'm happy to help as much as I can, but you and I have our own thing going, and then we just said this takes up so much time and so much dedication, and I'm happy to do that, but we need AGMA, our leaders who protect us in these negotiations with institutions, with companies that have direct conversations with directors. I think that's important. I think we need to ask for more help. We can get help and feel protected as dancers.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to be an artistic director, and I don't have that lens, and I know that that is a huge responsibility. But it goes beyond just saying, oh, I'm not racist. We talked about this personally, you and I, about intersectionality. It's frustrating for me that during this entire month of interviews, we've had zero interest when it comes to dance media. Most dance companies, I think Boston Ballet did a video, but I'm pretty sure that was Leah that organized
we had
that.
Boston Ballet, Pennsylvania Ballet, and Pacific Northwest Ballet have all been quite vocal for Asian Pacific Heritage Month, but they were really the exception. It's been pretty quiet, but understandably, people are busy with dealing with all of the financial issues. The coronavirus has definitely affected operations, but it's we see Black History Month, we see Gay Pride, we don't see Asian Pacific Heritage Month. Just something to keep in mind for the future, if there are any directors listening out there, that it's something to celebrate. And I think it means something because it signals to Asian students, hey, there's a place for you in our school, and there's a place for you in our company, and we see you. So it's a small thing, but if you do want to attract more Asian people into the community, that's one small, really effective way, visual way, to show that Asian people are welcome. It's subtle, but it's important.
But it also costs zero money to do that. I know that we are all struggling as dance institutions. There are ways to think outside of the box, and I think asking dancers ask dancers, ask for their opinion. I think that there's this delineation that the artistic directors can't talk to the dancers when it comes to how to bring ballet into the future, into the now. I think there has to be some sort of conversation between director and dancer, administration and dancers in a more articulate way, because it is the dancers now that are going to lead the companies in the future.
Absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about change. So we've sort of been on the very front lines of this conversation around Yellowface. And we've seen, obviously, quite a bit of change happening in a short amount of time. I know it feels like we've been working on this for a couple of years, but if you think about the grand scheme of things, it's really been only a minute that we've been talking about this conversation, and we've already seen a global response to our dance companies really making an effort to trying to be better about representing race. But tell me, how do you think, first of all, how has that experience been like for you at the center of this conversation, watching all of this change? And what else do you think the dance community needs to do to keep up this good momentum?
What has my experience been like? It's been an interesting ride. It has been sometimes a very, very scary and dark ride that I wanted to get off. I have to be brutally honest in that I have felt at times that since I have become so outspoken on this subject, there is the idea, it is not even an idea, there is the fact that people of administration look at me differently. And I mean not look at me, but I somehow have become, I can't find the right word, and a threat is not the right word. And that's not what I'm saying, but there is a sense, people take pause when they speak to me. And they take pause, I think, in the decision of whether or not to have me in the room. And they take pause whenever I bring something up that needs attention. And in some cases, that's a good thing. And in other cases, it works against me. And that has been a struggle. And the releasing of my ego and the things that I want for myself, this is not why I do this work. I'm doing this work for the tiny girl in the studio that wants to be a ballerina just like I have wanted, that has wanted to put on the crown, the sugar plum, that has wanted to be a queen, sees herself as that, and knows that she can do that. It's like the little girl who wrote us and said she can dance for that. Now she's going to go to school American Ballet. She feels like she's a shot. That is why I do this work. And the juxtaposition of my career kind of feeling like halted. It was halted also because I was injured. And that sucked. You and I, we started this as a wonderful creative outlet, but also a need. And, it hurts. And I'm not saying that this is the reason why I'm about to say what I'm about to say, but I do think it does have there's a factor in it. Like, it hurts when people ask me if I'm still with the New York City Ballet, because that's how rarely I'm seen on stage. It is a factor of many different things. But make no mistake, with all of the devotion that I have in this initiative that you and I share, I am very much determined to keep moving forward in my career. I just need to find the right moment, the right place, and the right time in which to do so, with respect and grace, and with protection to my mental health. And, my mental health took a big hit this past winter when I was certain, once again, my expectations of practicing and making oneself better and making word for word what leadership has said to me. For some reason in my head, it's like, you could be in a beautiful relationship and you might love someone, but that person might live on the other side of the earth in Australia and you live in New York. That's not going to work out. And sometimes I feel like there's this love between me and dance. And I'm not sure if it's going to work out in the end.
I think it's really incredible that out of this conversation, you really have more skin in the game than I do. I mean, at the end of the day, you're the one who's still employed by a ballet company. You still have to go take class in the morning with a company. I can be as loud as I want, and there's no professional repercussion for me. But I do see the price that you have paid. I do see in some of the limited interactions I have had with some members of different ballet companies, not New York City Ballet, but other ballet companies that have maybe not been as receptive to this conversation. That sort of coldness that you get in public when you say hi to people and they just don't even respond to you, only because there's some kind of a threat with this conversation. It's like, oh, that's really not what we're about. We're really not here to destroy the ballet, but there's so much fear in that. So, I really do respect you because you actually have skin in the game here. So, I guess I did want to think more about next steps for the ballet community as you see it? Like, what else do we need to work on to make this more equitable for everybody so that everyone feels welcome participating in ballet?
Well, I want to thank you so much for that love and support, because I think that's something that I've needed, and I've leaned on you hard, and in the support of some of the other dancers that we've interviewed has really bolstered my resolve in all of this. And I want to be clear that I love my home. I love New York City Ballet, but I think the ballet world in general, what we need to do I think we need to realize that it's going to take time, but in a school, the School of American Ballet, I agree with Daniel Applebaum and Anthony Huxley. They've really, really taken charge and have tried to influx more children into the pipeline who may or may not make it, regarding like that it comes down to physique and want and desire. That's something that needs to continue to happen. In terms of getting audiences need to be different. I think the focus less on like the one-off performances where it's like a cool night to come to the ballet. I think we've got to find a way to make the ballet as much as a ritual as us watching the Super Bowl is, and I know that certainly in American society, we love to quantify, and we love to, like Phil said, label, and, in sports games, you have like points and stuff, and ballet is not really based on points. And I know nothing of the competition circuit. That was never my sort of desire, or nor would I have done well in a competition setting. But we have to, I think tickets, I think we could look to Broadway a bit. They've done a marginally better job when it comes to inclusivity. I mean, there's still like tokenism that happens. And I think valuing that experience, if you get the chance to step outside of a company setting, I think leaders generally across the board could look to other performing arts organizations to see how they have made audiences more inclusive, media initiatives more inclusive. I think there's also somewhat of a breakdown until we get dancers in the pipeline and in companies of, I think this whole idea is like the principal dancers are the ones that get the most voice, the stars. I think we need to cast that aside a little bit. If you have people in your company who, for instance, this is an example, and I hope I'm not like hitting it over the head, but it's just what we've been steeped in. It's Asian Pacific Heritage Month. It doesn't matter if you know Asian Pacific Heritage principal dancers. If you have someone, send them forth, give them a moment. I think that's a moment where rank does not count. We're talking about humanity here. And that's where intersectionality comes back in. It's like bringing back the humanity. Dancers aren't just a commodity.
Yeah. I guess I wanted to, in closing this larger series, we're now wrapping up 31 days of interviews. I just wanted to ask you maybe what you learned from this conversation And what would you like to see next year's Asian Pacific Heritage Month look like in the ballet community?
I learned that there is so much need for these discussions. And there is a need for embracing across platforms to get more eyeballs on these kinds of discussions. What would I see? What do I want to see for next year's Asian Pacific Heritage Month? I would love to start being able to say, hey, here's some South Asian dancers here we're interviewing. Hey, like, and Phil, you and I, we have tried to be inclusive in this process as possible. I mean, we tailored this to mostly ballet dancers. Perhaps it expands beyond ballet dancers next year.
You do bring up a good point that we didn't interview any dancers of South Asian descent, and I think that points out a reality within classical ballet is that is a very highly underserved group that we don't see much representation of in classical ballet is people of South Asian descent. So hopefully by next year for Asian Pacific Heritage Month, we'll have more rising students who are entering the ranks of companies who do have that background. Because there's even hearing our stories between different ethnic minority groups within the Asian diaspora, we've had drastically different and diverse experiences that are worth hearing from. So I can't wait for hopefully next year for us to have an even larger, more inclusive tapestry to share with the world. Any other final thoughts you'd like to leave folks with in terms of the importance of this series?
I don't want leaders to be intimidated by the discussion. I don't want people, just because they feel uncomfortable, to ignore it. I want dancers to advocate for themselves. Like, if there are any South Asian dancers we've missed and you wanna talk to us, please. Like, Phil and I are both on Instagram. We're generally, Phil's better than I am at getting back to people, but please reach out. Please reach out. Send us stories. Send us comments. I want what you want. I want what Peter Bull wants. I want what Jonathan Stafford wants. I want what Wendy Whalen wants. I want ballet to move forward. I want ballet to be relevant today, not only post-COVID, but in our ever-changing society. And ballet needs to humanize its dancers. We need to humanize this ethereal experience as much as we can. I mean, there's nothing better than going into a theater and losing oneself in the uncanny abilities of ballet dancers and being swept away by Tchaikovsky and Stravinsky. But for it to survive, we have to make it more human. So how do we make it more human? I leave it with a question.
Well, I think that's a great way to leave us. So thank you again to all of our viewers who tuned in for the month of May for Asian Pacific Heritage Month. Gina, thank you again for being a wonderful partner, a wonderful co-producer, a wonderful editor and PR maven, and also doing all of this remotely while both of us have been in quarantine. So I could not ask for a better partner. Thank you so much to the audience for tuning in. There won't be an interview tomorrow, which is kind of sad. We will miss tuning in with you every day, but continue to speak up when you see things that you don't like. Use language that is inclusive, and hopefully Gina and I are looking forward to sharing Nutcracker season with everybody. We hope that there will be some performances of Nutcracker because it will kind of make us feel
I'm for
normal
hire.
and human again. Great.
Also, where's my lightning round? I was so prepared for a lightning round.
Okay, do you want to do a lightning round? Well, I feel like if people have tuned in this far, okay, if you've tuned in this far, you're going to get the unedited, unadulterated Gina Pazcoguin lightning round. On your mark. Okay, get set, go. Let's start with your ballet crush, because I love that one.
Jared Angle.
Who's your ballet crush? Jared Angle?
Always and forever.
Okay. What is your post-show guilty pleasure?
Bourbon.
What is your favorite role ever danced?
Anita.
What's the role that is just out of reach right now?
Sugar Plum.
If you could have dinner with one living or dead choreographer, who would it be?
Crystal Pite.
The world is on fire. You're running away to a desert island, and you can only fit 3 Balanchine ballets in your suitcase. Which 3 do you bring with you?
Serenade for a little bit of romance. La Valse for a little bit of darkness. And Symphony in 3 movements for some aerobics.
What is the most hideous costume you have ever worn on stage?
This gives me pause. Damn it.
There are so many.
There's so many. I've worn so many bad costumes. I mean, I have to say wearing a saddle and whipping a horsetail was out there in the stretch of costumes for me.
I won't ask.
Thank God I didn't have to rip
it. And what is your one wish for the ballet world?
Just that we grow up.
Okay, you're clearly not Asian enough because my answer was money.
I have it in my head. It was money. That first thing I was like, I can't say that because it's
money.
too on the nose. It was too on the nose.
All right, what's the tea? The tea has been spilled.
I'm keeping this all in.
Happy Asian Pacific Heritage Month. We'll see you for Nutcracker, hopefully. Bye, everybody.
Bye.